South Wales Police obviously are the main responders to reports or calls for help and incidents of domestic violence across the state. We know that there is a lot of unreported domestic violence. We tend to believe that the definition of domestic violence does or is associated with a pattern of behaviour. And in respect to male victims, I think we find across the board, I'm speaking fairly generally, is that most male victims of domestic violence are within the broader context of domestic violence as defined in the Crimes Act, as those persons who are more vulnerable within the community, those people, those males who would be within the older age groups, in relationships or in living with their siblings, their sons and daughters who may be abused, in carer situations, and they almost will be in situations where they are younger males living in families where there's an abusive father or abusive siblings. Again, with the presentation to police of, say, a stereotypical domestic violence situation with the male and female partners, I think police are often confronted by the male claiming to be a victim, and that is predominantly brought about by the presentation of injuries, and usually they're defensive injuries, we find. That's one area that police are looking at in their training in the future. We've had experience from overseas expertise in the likes of Anne Odell from San Diego Police in a presentation she did a couple of years ago, a very comprehensive presentation on the examination of aggressive and defensive injuries. Through the experience we're gaining in that area, we're getting a much better, we're building strategies to better identify aggressors within relationships, within domestic violence, and that also goes to same-sex domestic violence. And because when you've got young police officers attending domestic violence incidents in the field, they're coming across this couple for the very first time in many instances, and it's very confronting to try and identify the aggressor. I've seen situations where police have been manipulated by a male offender into being the victim, and only through further examination, with the assistance of the domestic violence liaison officers in the local area commands, and looking at the history of reports of other incidents that occurred previously, we've been able to identify the pattern of behaviour. And I think that's what we have to rely upon. We cannot claim to be experts in the dynamics of relationships when we first attend a domestic incident. We are basically there to prevent further injury, to prevent further damage to property, and also to protect children in those relationships. Police do make mistakes at times with identifying the aggressor and the victim, but we hope through the further training that and knowledge that we're gaining through panels like this and further research, that we're able to have a better handle on the actual incidents. In respect to, I'll just make a couple of notes as we moved along. One of the areas that we come across male victims is when they're appearing at court as a defendant. They'll often turn to the DVLOs and claim, well, this is all her fault or the partner's fault, and they'll go into a great diatribe of excuses as to why they are the victim, foregoing the actual violence they've perpetrated, but they'll blame everything and anything in respect to putting themselves on the pedestal as a victim. I think one of the issues is around the males' denial of self and their belief in their traditional roles, and when that's been challenged, they do turn to violence and abusive behaviour, and that's where they sort of tend to let themselves down. But they will live in this world of denial. With respect to strategies that New South Wales Police are looking at, we are obviously looking at being involved in the domestic violence integrated court models, the specialist judicial processes to deal with domestic violence cases, and we're eagerly looking at perpetrator programs as well from the sideline. But as we know, there's a lot of work to be done in that area, so we're interested in looking at all sorts of strategies to assist. But with males, within the intimate relationships that we're strictly talking about here, I can feel that we're talking about the strictly intimate relationships. In my time of 5 years as a DVLO in the field, I think I've only come across about 2 males that have been truly victims. And there have been cases where there has been a female, in one instance, with a genuine mental health issue. There have been another with a victim of a partner with substance abuse. So they're issues which are sort of beyond, I suppose, the control of most people in a partnership to deal with.